One day they were texting you good morning, calling you just to hear your voice, making you feel like the most important person in their world. And then, without any warning, without any fight, without any reason you can understand, silence. Complete silence. And you are sitting there replaying every single conversation, every single message, every single moment trying to figure out what you did wrong. But here is what nobody is telling you. You did not do anything wrong. What is happening right now has nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with something buried deep inside them that they themselves do not fully understand. You pick up your phone. You put it down. You pick it up again. Not because you are expecting a notification, but because some part of you is hoping that this time something will be there. A message, a reaction, anything that tells you they are still thinking about you the way you are thinking about them. But there is nothing. And that nothing feels louder than any argument you have ever had. You go back through your messages trying to find the moment things shifted. You read your last conversation 3, 4, maybe 10 times. You analyze your words. You wonder if you said something too needy, or maybe not enough. Maybe you were too available. Maybe you were not available enough. Your mind is running in circles, and the worst part is you cannot even ask them what is wrong because they are not responding. And it is not just the silence that hurts. It is the contrast, because you remember what it felt like before. You remember when they made you feel chosen, when they would reach out first, when being with them felt warm and easy and real. And now that same person feels like a stranger who decided overnight that you do not exist. You find yourself making excuses for them to everyone around you. They are just busy. They have a lot going on right now. This is just how they are sometimes. And maybe people around you are starting to look at you with that expression. The one that says they are worried about you but do not know how to say it. And deep down you feel a small voice inside you whispering that something is wrong. But loving them feels stronger than that voice right now. Can you see yourself in any of this? Because if you can, I want you to know something important. What you are feeling is not weakness. It is not desperation. It is what happens when a genuine, deeply feeling person connects with someone whose emotional world works in a way that most people never truly understand. And that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. Because the silence you are experiencing right now is not random. It is not personal in the way you think it is. And once you understand what is actually happening inside the mind of an avoidant when they go quiet, everything is going to start making a different kind of sense. That I want to share something with you before we go any further. Because I think it matters that you understand why I talk about this the way I do. I spent years studying psychology, 12 years to be exact. I read the research, I understood the frameworks, I could explain attachment theory in academic terms with clinical precision. But the moment I truly understood avoidant behavior was not in a classroom. It was when I lived it myself. When someone I deeply cared about went cold without explanation and I sat in exactly the same confusion you are sitting in right now. That experience changed everything about how I approach this subject. Because I stopped seeing it as theory and started seeing it as something real people carry inside them every single day. And the research actually confirms what so many of you are experiencing. A landmark study by psychologists Cindy Hazan and Philip Shaver back in 1987 was one of the first to map adult attachment styles onto romantic relationships. What they found was that the patterns we develop in childhood with our caregivers become the blueprint for how we behave in intimate relationships as adults. People with avoidant attachment specifically learned very early that expressing emotional needs led to disconnection or rejection. So their nervous system adapted. It learned to suppress. It learned to withdraw. It learned that closeness feels dangerous even when part of them genuinely wants it. And here is what that means for you right now. When an avoidant goes silent, when they pull away out of nowhere, they are not making a calculated decision to hurt you. Something is happening inside their emotional system that is older than your relationship. Something that was wired into them long before they ever met you. A more recent study published in the journal Personal Relationships found that people with avoidant attachment show measurably higher cortisol responses, that is the stress hormone, when they feel emotionally close to someone. Intimacy itself becomes a physiological stressor for them. Not because they are broken, but because their nervous system never learned that closeness was safe. Today, I am going to walk you through the real reasons an avoidant goes silent out of nowhere. Not the surface reasons. The deep ones. The psychological ones that finally make the behavior make sense. And by the end of this, you are going to understand not just what is happening, but what it actually means for you and what you can do with that understanding. The first thing you need to understand is this. When an avoidant goes silent, they are not sitting somewhere calmly deciding to ignore you. What is actually happening is far more involuntary than that. Their nervous system is responding to something it perceives as a threat. And that threat is emotional closeness itself. Think about what happens when any person feels genuinely threatened. Their body activates what psychologists call the fight, flight, or freeze response. Heart rate increases. Thinking becomes narrow and reactive. The instinct to escape takes over. For most people, this response is triggered by physical danger or external stress. But for someone with avoidant attachment, this exact same biological response gets triggered by emotional intimacy, by vulnerability, by the feeling that someone is getting too close to the parts of them they have spent a lifetime protecting. This is called emotional deactivation. It is a specific defense mechanism that avoidants use, often completely unconsciously, to regulate the overwhelming feeling that comes with deep connection. When the closeness between you and them reached a certain level of intensity, something inside them hit an internal alarm. And instead of being able to say, "I feel overwhelmed right now and I need some space," which would require a level of vulnerability they are not capable of yet, they simply went quiet. They disappeared, because disappearing felt safer than explaining. Here is a real-life scenario that might feel familiar to you. Things between you two were genuinely good. Maybe you had a deep conversation recently. Maybe there was a moment where you both felt incredibly connected. Maybe they said something that surprised even them, something tender or revealing. And then the very next day or a few days later, the messages slowed down, then stopped. And you are confused because from your perspective, that beautiful moment should have brought you closer. But from their nervous system's perspective, that moment was the exact trigger. The closeness felt too real, too exposed. And their system did what it always does when it feels exposed. It shut down. What this means for you is important. The silence is not a verdict on your relationship. It is not them telling you that what you had was not real. It is them telling you, in the only language their nervous system currently knows, that they felt something and it scared them. The more significant the connection, the more intense the withdrawal can be. That is actually one of the most counterintuitive things about avoidant attachment. The deeper they feel something, the more likely they are to pull away from it. And I need you to stay with me here because this next part changes everything. This is one of the most important distinctions I can help you make. Because the way the silence feels from your side is like punishment. It feels like they are withholding something from you deliberately. It feels like they are in control and you are not. It feels like they are making a conscious decision to make you suffer. And that interpretation makes sense from where you are standing. But it is not what is actually happening inside them. When an avoidant withdraws, they are not thinking about the impact on you. And I know that sounds harsh, but stay with me. They are not thinking about you at all in those moments. They are entirely consumed by their own internal experience. The withdrawal is not directed at you. It is directed inward. It is a wall they build not to keep you out specifically, but to keep themselves in. To contain the emotional experience that feels like it is getting too big, too overwhelming, too threatening to their sense of self. Psychologists call this a deactivating strategy. It is a pattern where the avoidant person mentally and emotionally minimizes the relationship when it starts to feel too intense. They might start focusing obsessively on your flaws. They might tell themselves the relationship is not that serious. They might convince themselves they do not actually need you, not because those things are true, but because their mind is working hard to create emotional distance so that the anxiety of closeness becomes manageable again. Here is what this looks like in real life. You two had been spending a lot of time together. Things felt serious. Maybe you started talking about the future in some small way. Maybe they met someone important in your life. Maybe you told them something deeply personal about yourself and they responded with more warmth than usual. And then suddenly they become distant. Short replies, taking hours to respond, canceling plans. And when you ask if everything is okay, they say, "I'm fine, just busy." But you can feel that something shifted. You just cannot understand what or why. What happened is that the relationship crossed an invisible threshold in their mind. The level of intimacy reached a point where their deactivating strategies kicked in automatically. They started pulling back not because they want to lose you, but because getting closer to you was activating a fear that lives much deeper than your relationship. A fear that says, if I let someone all the way in, I will lose myself. Or worse, they will leave anyway. What this means for you is that chasing them in this moment, doubling your messages, asking repeatedly what is wrong, expressing how much their silence is hurting you, all of that actually intensifies their need to withdraw further. Not because you are wrong for feeling those things, but because it confirms to their nervous system that closeness equals pressure equals danger. And when you understand this next point, everything starts to make sense in a completely new way. This one is going to feel counterintuitive. And I want you to really sit with it because it genuinely changes the way you read the situation you are in right now. The moments when an avoidant goes most silent are often the moments when they are feeling the most. Not the least. Not when they have checked out or stopped caring. But when something inside them has been genuinely moved and they do not know what to do with that feeling. Here is the psychology behind this. People with avoidant attachment did not grow up in environments where big emotions were welcomed or safely held. Many of them had caregivers who were emotionally unavailable, dismissive, or inconsistent. When they expressed sadness or fear or love as children, those emotions were either ignored, minimized, or met with discomfort. So they learned to do something very specific. They learned to disconnect from their own emotional experience, to intellectualize it, to push it down and function as if it were not there. But here is what that early learning created in adulthood. When a feeling becomes too strong to intellectualize away, when something genuinely moves them and they cannot file it neatly into a manageable mental box, the only tool they have left is distance. Physical distance, emotional distance, and in today's world, digital distance. Silence. Let me give you a specific scenario. Imagine you were sick recently and they showed up for you in a way that surprised even them. Or you had a conversation where you were vulnerable about something painful in your past and they listened in a way that felt deeply present. Or maybe there was a moment of physical closeness that felt different from anything before. Something unspoken but completely real passed between you. And you went to sleep that night feeling closer to them than ever. And then they disappeared. From your side, it makes no sense. From their side, something happened that was too big for their emotional system to process while staying connected to you at the same time. The feeling was real. It was significant. And that significance is exactly what triggered the retreat. Because significance means vulnerability. And vulnerability to the avoidant nervous system has always meant risk. What this means for you is profound if you let it land. The silence you are experiencing right now may actually be evidence of how much they feel, not evidence of how little. That does not mean the silence is acceptable or that you should simply wait indefinitely without any clarity. But it does mean you can stop torturing yourself with the story that you meant nothing to them. Because the depth of the withdrawal often mirrors the depth of the feeling underneath it. Before I continue, I want you to think about your own situation right now. Think about what happened right before they went quiet. Was there a moment of real closeness? A conversation that went deeper than usual? Because that context matters more than you realize. Everything we have talked about so far connects to this point. And this one goes deeper than the relationship itself. This one goes all the way back to where the avoidant pattern was first created. Because the silence you are experiencing right now is not something that started with you. It started decades ago in a home you never saw, with people you never met, during moments that shaped everything about how this person relates to love today. Attachment theory, which was originally developed by British psychologist John Bowlby and later expanded by Mary Ainsworth through her famous strange situation experiments, tells us something fundamental about human beings. We are wired for connection from birth. A baby needs not just food and shelter but emotional attunement. They need a caregiver who responds consistently to their emotional signals, who shows up when they cry, who reflects warmth back when the baby reaches out. That consistent responsiveness is what teaches a child that the world is safe, that relationships are safe, that being vulnerable with another person leads to comfort, not rejection. But not every child gets that. Some children grow up with caregivers who were loving but emotionally unavailable, who provided for every physical need but struggled to meet emotional ones, who responded to tears with "you are fine" or "stop being so sensitive," who got uncomfortable when the child needed too much. And so that child adapted. They became self-sufficient earlier than they should have. They learned to need less, to feel less, or at least to appear to feel less, because needing things emotionally led to disappointment every single time. That child grew up, and they became the person you are in a relationship with right now. Here is what this looks like in your real-life experience. You might have noticed that your avoidant person is incredibly capable and independent. They handle their life with impressive self-sufficiency. They rarely ask for help. They seem unbothered by things that would emotionally affect most people. And early on, that quality might have even attracted you. They seemed stable, grounded, strong. But what you are now experiencing on the other side of that strength is the cost of it. The same walls that make them appear unshakable are the walls that go up between you and them the moment things get emotionally real. What this means for you is this: their withdrawal is not a reflection of your inadequacy. It is a reflection of a wound that existed long before you. You did not create this pattern. You cannot fix this pattern by loving them harder or being more understanding or making yourself smaller so they feel less overwhelmed. This pattern belongs to them, and the only person who can do the deep work of changing it is them. If nothing else from this video, I want you to remember this one thing. You are not competing with another person for their attention. You are competing with a deeply ingrained survival mechanism that has been running since childhood. And knowing that changes everything about how you see yourself in this situation.